Hello, welcome to the channel. Subscribe, leave a like, and don't forget to write a comment. Enjoy watching.
The lights in the auditorium hit harder than expected, bright and wide like a movie set, and as I walked across the stage, every inch of my body felt like it was vibrating under my robe. It wasn't nerves. I've never really been nervous in front of people. It was more like I was floating in that strange space where everything's happening to you, but you're not really in it. The announcer had just finished calling the names of a few people I barely remembered from early semester group projects, and then suddenly I heard my name, said just slightly wrong like always Emily R. Harmon instead of Ray Harmon. Because nobody ever remembers the hyphen unless you're someone whose dad's a donor. I smiled out of reflex, not because I saw anyone in the crowd, but because that's what you're supposed to do when you're up there alone. I kept telling myself not to scan the crowd, don't give yourself false hope, don't look for something that isn't there. But my eyes still flicked instinctively toward the sixth row from the front, just left of center, where I told them I'd reserved seats. Empty. Still empty. The dean handed me the award, a narrow black box with a silver medallion inside. He leaned in, whispered something like, "You've made us proud," and all I could think was how funny it is that a stranger could say something I've wanted to hear from my own family for 25 years. Or wait, no, 26? Actually, no, I'm 25 now. So yeah, it had been exactly 15 years since my last graduation from middle school. It hit me again, hard and dry, as I held that cold piece of metal. I was alone. No clapping from my mom, no over-the-top cheers from Claire, no badly timed whistle from my uncle. Just the generic applause of people who were waiting for their own child to walk up. I looked out at the sea of polite strangers and tried to picture her face, Mom's, maybe biting her lip like she does when she's proud but doesn't want to show it, or Claire's overly dramatic eye roll when I get too serious. But they weren't there. They weren't anywhere. Exactly 1 hour earlier, my phone buzzed while I was zipping up my robe in the restroom stall. I had this weird premonition that it was going to be bad, not gut-wrenching, but disappointing, which in some ways hurts more. I unlocked the screen, and there it was. "Sorry, honey. We can't make it." Something came up. "Love you. So proud." The text read like it had been copy-pasted, like a template she could have used for canceling a brunch date or rescheduling a dentist appointment. No explanation, no call, just a quick message 20 minutes before the ceremony. I stared at it for a long second, trying to figure out what could possibly have come up that was more important than this. But I already knew the answer before I opened Instagram. Claire had posted a story 5 minutes before the ceremony began. A short boomerang clip of her holding up a mimosa glass, clinking it with Mom's, both of them grinning, like it was some sort of magazine cover. The caption was casual, like it was just another Sunday. "Birthday brunch with the Queen herself #Mom and me." My ears started to ring a little, and I actually laughed, out loud, right there in the empty bathroom, with my gown half-zipped and my honor cords tangled up like a joke. They hadn't even tried to hide it. They just didn't come. I didn't cry. I didn't rage or scream or throw my phone across the floor like in the movies. I just stood still, watching their perfect little digital world unfold in front of me. Claire, with her glossy hair and coordinated pastel outfit, and Mom, glowing under flattering lighting, both smiling into a camera while I prepared to give the most important speech of my life, alone. There's something uniquely painful about realizing you've been cast as an extra in your own family's story. That moment, watching their champagne flutes rise like a toast to my relevance, that was the click. Something inside me hardened, quiet and permanent. I zipped my robe the rest of the way, tucked my phone into my sleeve pocket, and walked back out onto the stage entrance hall like nothing had happened. No one could tell. That's the thing about me, I've always been good at making people comfortable, even when I was in hell. When the applause died down after my speech, I looked straight into the camera. There were a couple of local news crews filming, plus the university livestream. I paused for just half a second, then said it clearly, deliberately, and with just the tiniest curve of a smile. "This one's for everyone who left me behind." I let the words hang there. People thought I meant former teachers or old bullies or maybe even doubters from my past jobs. But the ones who really listened, the ones who felt that line in their stomach, they knew. That medal wasn't for me. It was for them. For every person who thought I'd always be the one clapping in the audience, not standing on the stage. For the people who never thought I'd be worth showing up for. So I smiled. Not because I was happy, but because sometimes the best revenge is letting them see exactly what they missed. There are certain stories families tell over and over, like worn-out bedtime tales with slightly different endings depending on who's doing the remembering, and in our house, those stories always starred Claire, bright, beaming, and somehow always lit from within like a walking holiday card. She was the golden child from the very beginning, and I don't say that with bitterness or envy, not at first, anyway. It was just the reality. You grow up enough around certain patterns, and you start recognizing them like traffic lights. Red means stop talking. Green means Claire just walked in. Yellow means you've got about 5 seconds to make yourself useful or invisible. I remember the summer I turned 9 and Claire was almost 15, right at the age where she started experimenting with eyeliner and sarcasm, where boys were beginning to care and Mom pretended not to notice the way she'd hike her tank tops a little higher when walking past them at the grocery store. That was the summer I asked for a new bike, a blue one with tassels and a basket, and maybe even gears if we could afford it. I'd left brochures on the kitchen table, circled photos in a Sharpie, even wrote a note that said, "I'll ride it every day and take care of it forever." What I got instead, 2 weeks later, was Claire's old 10-speed, the one with the bent spoke and the peeling decals and the sticky hand grip from where she'd spilled Slurpee and never cleaned it. Mom handed it to me like it was a surprise gift. "See, still good as new." She'd chirped, as if her voice alone could buff out the rust. Claire got a new one, of course. Sleek, white, imported. A ribbon tied to the handlebars with a card that said, "For our star rider." I asked once why the card didn't say, "Our daughters," and Mom laughed and said, "You know we love you both the same. Don't be silly." But that was always the thing, they never said the words outright, they just made you feel them. Like an invisible draft you can't see, but always notice when it brushes your skin. It wasn't just the bikes. It was every birthday party that started as ours and somehow turned into hers. I'd blow out candles while Claire opened gifts, or worse, I'd find out mine had been rewrapped from something she didn't want anymore. I remember once unwrapping a pink sweater at my 11th birthday party only to see her initials stitched inside the collar. "She barely wore it," Mom said, "and it still looks brand new." As if that somehow made it mine. Holidays were even worse. Claire always got the seat next to Dad at the dinner table back when he was still around, before he left for a project out west that never came back. She'd help carve the turkey, lead the prayer, distribute the gifts, and I'd end up washing dishes or setting the table or being told, "Let your sister handle it. She knows how you get under pressure." Once, when I broke a plate, Claire smirked and whispered, "Can't take you anywhere," and it stung worse than the glass that sliced my thumb. Even at the hospital, years later, when Grandma Ray was dying and we were all called in for goodbyes, it was Claire who got the final moment. She was the last to speak, the one everyone stepped aside for. Mom placed her hand on Claire's back like she was royalty, and I stood in the corner pretending not to care, pretending the lump in my throat was just from the smell of antiseptic and old flowers. Grandma had loved me, I know she had, but Claire was the one who got to say goodbye. I was the one who got to go start the car. For years I told myself it wasn't intentional, that they didn't mean to do it, that Claire just happened to shine a little brighter, talk a little louder, take up more space in every room. And for a long time, that lie worked. It kept me quiet, kept me helpful, kept me agreeable. But then something shifted, a slow, bitter drip in the back of my head, and I started realizing, yeah, maybe they kinda did. The worst part wasn't how they overlooked me. It was how they trained me to overlook myself. Every time I won an award, I was told not to brag. When I got into honors, I was told Claire had done it 2 years earlier. When I asked for a little attention, I was told not to make everything about me. I spent years shrinking, compressing, folding myself up into something small enough to slip into the cracks of Claire's spotlight. I didn't want to steal her thunder. I just wanted a corner of the stage. So when I got into my first choice university, early decision, scholarship, the kind of acceptance letter you dream about, I planned a dinner. Nothing fancy. Just the 5 of us. Mom, Claire, Uncle Ron, Aunt Trish, and me. I picked the restaurant, paid for the dessert myself, even brought the letter in a little envelope sealed with a ribbon. It was supposed to be my moment. I got 3 sentences into reading it out loud when Claire, with impeccable timing and zero shame, interrupted with, "Well, I guess this is as good a time as any. Adam and I are getting engaged." She even held up the ring for the waiter. Everyone clapped. Everyone stood. Even Uncle Ron, who should have known better, gave her a damn toast. And me? I just folded the letter back up and slipped it into my purse. Nobody noticed. Or if they did, they didn't say a word. The restaurant was one of those places with dim yellow lighting and overpriced appetizers served on comically large plates, the kind of spot people picked not because they liked it, but because it photographed well. Which made it all the more ironic that the one and only person who actually showed up didn't even own a working smartphone. Uncle Ron walked in 10 minutes late, looking like he'd just rolled out of a pickup truck and maybe down a hill after it, scuffed boots, wrinkled denim shirt, and that same old baseball cap with the frayed bill that he insisted wasn't dirty but seasoned by life. I had booked the table for 5, maybe out of foolish optimism or maybe just to see who would make the effort, but the other 4 chairs stayed as empty as they always had when it came to my victories. The hostess gave us a sideways glance when Ron asked loudly if they had anything cheaper than the wine list, and when I told him not to worry, that I was covering the check, he squinted at me for a moment before grunting, "Damn right you are, college hotshot." Then he smiled, that crooked, half-missing tooth grin that only ever showed up when he was actually proud of something or someone. I hadn't seen it directed at me in a long time. We ordered food we didn't really want and sipped at drinks we couldn't pronounce, and in between bites of whatever fusion nonsense the place was selling, Ron started in on his usual stories, the ones that walked the tightrope between hilarious and inappropriate. But somewhere between the one about him crashing a wedding in Florida and the one about punching a guy over a bed about Reagan, he stopped mid-sentence and looked at me across the table. Not just looked, but really looked, like he'd suddenly remembered something important about me that he hadn't said out loud yet. "You know, Em," he said, swirling his glass of something amber that wasn't on the menu, "you got something those people don't. I don't mean just brains a hell, Claire's smart too, in her own full-of-herself way. I mean guts. Backbone. You don't whine, you don't pout, you just do the damn thing." I didn't say anything. I didn't want to interrupt him, and more than that, I didn't want to break the moment. It felt rare, almost sacred, like hearing a secret that wasn't meant to be shared twice. He raised his glass, which was mostly empty by then, and said, "You're the real deal, Em. You're gonna bury all of them in your rear view. Not 'cause you want to, but 'cause they're too damn slow to keep up." The toast was clumsy, a little slurred, and nowhere near poetic, but it hit me harder than any speech I'd ever heard. He wasn't trying to impress anyone, wasn't performing for a camera, and he didn't say it for show. He said it because he meant it, because in that moment, I think he might have been the only person who really saw me for what I was, not Claire's little sister, not Mom's backup plan, not the family's polite, invisible achiever, but someone who had done something worth showing up for. When the bill came, he reached for it anyway, and we had a mild, awkward wrestling match over the leather folder until he finally let go, muttering, "Fine, be a damn adult about it." He stuffed a couple of crumpled bills in for tip and stood up, giving me a quick nod that I recognized as the Ron equivalent of a hug. That dinner happened exactly 1 week before the ceremony. The last time I'd see him in person before I stepped onto that stage and accepted the medal without anyone there to clap for me. He didn't come to the graduation, not because he didn't want to, but because he was in the hospital for something he hadn't told anyone about yet. He texted me the morning of, though, and the message was so on brand it made me laugh through my makeup. Go make M wish they paid attention earlier. You got this, kid. Now, sitting in my dorm room with the medal in my hand and the echo of applause long faded, I stared out the window at the kind of spring sunset that always made campus feel like a painting. I kept waiting for the phone to ring, waiting for a call from Mom, maybe a message from Claire, even just a forwarded group chat text from Aunt Trish saying, "We saw you on Facebook." But there was nothing. Absolute silence. Like my achievement was a tree falling in the forest with nobody around to hear it crash. The medal felt heavier than it had during the ceremony, not because of the physical weight, but because of what it symbolized: the years of late nights, missed parties, solo wins, and forced smiles. I turned it over in my hand, running my thumb along the edge, thinking about all the times I'd clapped for other people, all the birthdays, anniversaries, and engagements where I'd been the background applause in someone else's spotlight. My phone buzzed suddenly, startling me from the trance. I reached for it with a flicker of something I tried not to name. Maybe hope, maybe desperation, maybe both. The notification wasn't from Mom, not from Claire, not even from Uncle Ron. It was a DM. From Coach Malik. "Proud of you, kid." That speech gave me goosebumps. I stared at the screen for a long moment, letting the words sink in, and without thinking, I smiled. It wasn't the big, public smile I'd worn on stage, the one meant for the cameras and strangers. It was small, quiet, real. Because finally, someone had heard me. It was around 10:30 that night, well after the ceremony had ended and after I had peeled off the robe that smelled faintly of starch and nerves, when I sat down on the edge of my bed and pulled up the video I hadn't planned on posting. It wasn't long, barely a minute and 20 seconds, a cropped and shaky clip from the university's stream someone had screen recorded for me. It captured just enough the end of my walk across the stage, the slight hesitation before I leaned into the mic, the metal glinting against my chest, and the line I knew would live in people's heads longer than anything else from that day. "This one's for everyone who left me behind." I didn't say it with bitterness, not overtly anyway, and I didn't say it to start a fight. I said it because it was the truest sentence I'd spoken in months, maybe years. There was something liberating about that moment. The way my voice rang through the auditorium with nothing to blunt its edge. The way I smiled, not like someone looking for applause, but like someone finally done apologizing for outgrowing the silence. I posted the clip with a caption that just said, "Sometimes it's not about proving them wrong. Sometimes it's just about proving you were right all along." I didn't tag anyone, didn't call out names, didn't drop any breadcrumbs, but I knew exactly who would feel it, and I knew exactly how deep it would cut if they watched it all the way through. The video didn't explode or go viral in the way internet people dream about, but in my hometown, that tiny world with long memory and even longer grudges, it might as well have been a Super Bowl ad. Within 12 hours it had racked up hundreds of shares, a few thousand views, and a fresh, new round of text messages from numbers I hadn't seen since junior prom or the Girl Scout troop I'd quit in 6th grade. The first message came from Aunt Trish. Not a greeting, not a congrats, just 5 words. "Was that shade at your mother?" It wasn't even accusatory, just that mildly scolding tone older relatives use when they want to pretend they're not stirring the pot while gripping the ladle with both hands. I didn't answer her. I didn't owe her an explanation. Then came the Facebook comments. Oh, the comments. Some were sweet. People from high school I barely remembered saying things like, "Always knew you'd go far," or "So proud of you, Emily." Others were the backhanded kind. The ones that said family is everything, remember that, or hope things work out between you and yours. One comment in particular stood out, from someone's mom who used to drive the carpool. "You girls were so close growing up. What happened?" What happened, I wanted to type back, was that one of us kept being handed the world and the other kept being told to wait her turn. Around dinner time the next evening, my phone rang. Not a text. A full call, rare enough from her that I knew immediately who it was before I even looked. I answered, and her voice came through sharp, tight, too cheerful to be real. "Hey, sweetie. Just saw your video," she said, pausing like she expected me to thank her for noticing. "Really powerful stuff. But I was wondering, are you okay?" I didn't reply right away. I let the silence stretch long enough to make her uncomfortable. When I finally answered, I kept my tone flat. "I'm fine. Were you expecting me not to be?" She laughed nervously, the way she always did when she knew something was wrong but didn't want to admit it. No, of course not. It's just, well, you said some things in that speech about people leaving you behind." I cut in before she could wind herself into her usual passive-aggressive spiral. "You mean about you leaving me behind?" There was a beat of dead air on the line, and then she tried to recover. "Emily, come on. That's not fair. We had Claire's birthday brunch. You know how much she wanted it to be special." "Right," I said, and I could hear my voice harden without even trying. "You made her feel special. You made damn sure of that. But you couldn't show up for me. You couldn't even lie better than brunch." She sighed, that long, pained sigh that always sounded like, "How dare you make me feel bad for this?" Then came the line I knew was coming, the real reason for the call. "Why are you trying to make me look bad online?" I laughed. Not loud. Not cruel. Just enough to let her know I'd been expecting it. "You did that just fine without me." She muttered something after that about being dramatic, about not airing family things publicly, but I'd already stopped listening. I was done shrinking myself into a box small enough to fit inside her carefully arranged life. She ended the call with a clipped, "We'll talk later," and I said sure, even though I had no intention of doing so. Later that night, while scrolling through the hundreds of notifications still flooding in, I saw a comment that made me stop cold. Claire had finally shown up in the thread, not with a message, not with a call, but with 6 words that were perfectly on brand in their selfishness. "Maybe if you told us it was important, we'd have come." No apology. No regret. Just that glib deflection, as if the fault lay in my silence and not their absence. As if my worth was measured by how loud I screamed for attention. I stared at the comment for a full minute, my finger hovering over the delete button, then over the reply, then back again. In the end, I did neither. I just let it sit there, like a stain no one could scrub out, because sometimes the best kind of truth is the kind that doesn't need to be defended, it just is. Let them read it. Let them see it. Let them wonder. The camera had caught my smile that day, a sharp, deliberate smile that wasn't for them, wasn't for forgiveness, wasn't even for the medal. It was for me. And if that smile made anyone uncomfortable, good. It had been 6 months since I stood on that stage, holding a medal that shimmered under stage lights, but felt more like a mirror than a trophy, reflecting back every year I spent trying to earn applause from people too distracted to notice I was even standing up. And now it was Thanksgiving, cold wind, brittle leaves, casserole smells clinging to old sweaters, and I was back in town, walking the creaky floors of my mother's house like someone visiting a museum of herself. Nothing had changed, not really. The fake pumpkins still lined the windowsills. The scented candles were the same ones she'd had since I was in high school, all cinnamon and obligation. The framed photo of Claire on the staircase still hung slightly crooked, but no one dared straighten it. Dinner was set for 8, though only 6 came. Mom blamed the flu, blamed traffic, blamed the universe, but not once did she mention graduation. Not once did she ask about the medal, the speech, or the video that had turned me into a minor hometown legend and family inconvenience all at once. She carved the turkey like everything was fine, poured wine like forgiveness was floating in the air, and laughed with Aunt Trish about Claire's upcoming wedding as if I hadn't stood in that same kitchen 6 months ago. Holding the silence like a live wire while waiting for someone to notice I had been electric all along. Claire was glowing, of course, that hyper-shiny, pre-wedding, I'm the center of the universe kind of glow. She handed out Pinterest-style invitations to her bridal shower with perfect handwriting and little gold wax seals, and she made eye contact with every single person around the table as she passed them out. Except me. When she reached me, she just said, "Oh, I didn't think you'd be interested in the whole wedding party chaos." No apology, no discussion, just a statement dressed like a courtesy. I didn't flinch. I didn't protest. I just nodded and said, "You're probably right." I watched her face twitch just slightly, a micro-expression, gone in a blink, the look of someone who was expecting a fight and didn't quite know what to do when one didn't come. I took another bite of mashed potatoes and changed the subject before the silence could settle. The next day, needing air and distance and anything that didn't smell like turkey or tension, I drove to the one store in town that still felt like neutral ground. The little corner grocery off Maple where I used to buy soda and scratch-off tickets when I needed 5 minutes away from everyone. I was wandering through the tea aisle, debating between overpriced chamomile and something labeled sleep detox, when I heard someone say my name like it actually meant something. Emily Ray. I turned around, and there he was, Coach Malik, older than I remembered, a little more silver in his beard, but still upright and solid in the way people only are when they've built their whole lives on keeping others from falling. We hugged, that kind of hug where you mean it but also aren't sure if you're supposed to. He pulled back and smiled like someone who knew things he wasn't going to say out loud. "I saw the speech," he said, reaching for a box of oatmeal. "Twice, actually. Second time I showed it to my niece. Told her, that's what it looks like when you don't let them break you down." I swallowed whatever lump rose in my throat and nodded. "Thanks. That means more than you probably know." He put the box in his basket, then looked at me, really looked, like Uncle Ron had, like maybe one other person ever had. Then he said something I'd replay for months, years even, in moments when doubt tried to come creeping back in like a leak under the door. "Sometimes the seat you save for them," he said, voice low and quiet like a confession. They were never planning to sit in it anyway. We didn't say much after that, just a few nods and a promise to stay in touch that probably wouldn't happen. But it didn't matter. He'd already given me what I needed. Not a lecture, not a lesson, but a truth I hadn't been brave enough to admit to myself. 2 days later, I got the package. It was wrapped in plain brown paper, no return address, just my name written in slanted block letters I recognized instantly. Uncle Ron. Inside was a frame, handcrafted or maybe just thrifted and reworked, around the medal from graduation. The medal I hadn't even told him I still had. Beneath the medal was a note, handwritten in blue ink with a smudge near the edge where he'd probably rested his palm. For someone who sees it all and still shows up. For someone who never needed the audience to win the race. For someone who I see. Always. Signed, Ron. I didn't cry. I didn't break. I just sat there on the floor of my apartment, cross-legged in the middle of unopened mail and leftover coffee cups, and stared at the frame like it was proof. Not just that someone cared, but that someone saw, without being told, without being prompted, without being manipulated into attention. I hung it on the wall beside my desk. No spotlight, no bragging. Just there. A week later, back in town one last time to drop something off for work, I walked past that same brunch cafe where Claire had once clinked glasses with Mom, smiling into a phone screen like it was her real reflection. They were there again. Different outfits, same energy. Laughing, toasting, living like nothing had ever cracked. I watched them through the window for a moment, not bitter, not even sad. Just watching, and then I turned away. I smiled. Not the kind of smile that asked to be seen, but the kind you give yourself when you finally stop chasing the people who never planned to stay. I spent so long waiting to be invited. Turns out, building your own table? That's the real power move.